Okay, hello class. I had a request to try and do my best to explain how to do the quadratic formula to you. It's not an easy topic. I appreciate it is difficult to learn this remotely. Hopefully this video will help a little bit more if, some other students, you were struggling to follow what to do from the My Maths lesson and from the example. We'll break it down in steps. Let's start off with what the formula is. This is something you need to know, even though it is the most complicated formula you'll have to remember in your GCSE Maths, I would say. It's something you need to remember, and it is that x is equal to minus b plus or minus the square roots of b squared minus 4ac all over the whole thing divided by 2a. So I guess that's the first difficult thing that makes this a challenging topic and a high grade topic question. The fact that it's a difficult formula to remember. There's also some confusing things in it, like the plus minus. What does that mean? We'll explore that in a short while. And the final thing that's quite difficult in it, I think, is substituting incorrectly. So once you know what your A, your B and your C is, then what are you going to put as A and B and C, and are you going to make any silly mistakes with the negatives? We've got a negative B here, so that means that if B was a negative value, like negative 2, then negative B is going to become positive 2, because you're going to have a negative of a negative here. So this whole thing would become positive 2 if you knew B was negative. Likewise, if you had a negative A value, then that would cancel out with this negative at the front of the 4AC part, so you'd end up with a positive here if either A or C was negative. But we'll look at examples for these. Okay, let's do the first problem here. Now, if you're thinking we could just solve this by factorising, you are correct. And what I would suggest you do is have a go to begin with, pausing this video, at solving this problem, x squared plus 16x plus 55 equals 0, by factorising. You might have already done it because it was something I gave as an optional starter if you weren't feeling too confident for this lesson. Okay, and if you click play now, if you'd factorise this, you would have got x plus 11, x plus 5 equals 0, and so x is equal to negative 5 or x is equal to negative 11. So there's two possible solutions for what x is here, and this is why we have this plus minus, because often we'll get two possible solutions for what x is. So the way that the quadratic formula works is with you understanding as students the general form of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Where A, B and C just represent constant numbers that go in front of each term. So here we've got 1 x squared, 16 x's and 55. So in other words, I can see that my A is going to be equal to 1, my B is going to equal to 16, and my C is going to equal to 55. So as long as I remember the quadratic formula, I can solve this using the quadratic formula instead of by factorising. Factorising is clearly a much more sensible thing to do here, isn't it? But sometimes we can't solve by factorising, we have to use the quadratic formula. So let's just use an example where we've done both to see that in both cases we get the same answer. So if I substitute into my quadratic formula here, I'm going to get that x is equal to negative b is going to become negative 16 plus or minus the square roots of b squared, so that's going to be 16 squared, minus 4 times by a, which is 1, times by c, which is 55. So the square root of all of that. Now I've got to divide all of that by 2 times by my a, so that's 2 times by 1. So I'm going to need my calculator for this. If I use my calculator, let's do what's inside this square root first. So I've got to do the square root of 16 squared minus 4 times by 1 times by negative 55. Sorry, times by just positive 55. That gives me 6. So I get negative 16 plus or minus 6 all over 2 times 1, which is 2. So that's what x is equal to. So that means that x is equal to negative 16 plus 6 over 2, or it's negative 16 minus 6 over 2. Well, negative 16 plus 6 is negative 10, divided by 2 is negative 5. Negative 16 minus 6 is negative 22, divided by 2 is negative 11. So I end up with the same solutions, that x is either equal to negative 5 or equal to negative 11. Let's have a look at a different problem now. So we've got x squared minus 5x plus 4 equals 0. I'd like you to pause the video, and I want you to write down what a is equal to, what b is equal to, and what c is equal to. And then when you've written that, click play. And well done if you're at the a again is equal to 1 here. B is now going to equal to negative 5, because it's minus, and c is going to be equal to positive 4. So what I'd like you to do is write down what the quadratic formula is, please. I would close down the window and try and, from memory, remember this. And hopefully what you wrote down, now you've clicked play again, is that x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square roots of b squared minus 4ac all over the whole thing is divided by 2a. So if we substitute our values in here, I know my x is equal to negative of negative 5, so that's going to become positive 5, plus or minus the square roots of negative 5 squared, so it might be worth putting those in brackets, because if I don't do that in my calculator, it'll give me the wrong answer. If you put negative 5, you might just try it now, if you put minus 5 and press squared button, it'll tell you the answer is negative 25 and not 25, because it will square the 5 and then multiply by negative 1 in its calculator ahead. So it's best to always put negatives in brackets when you're putting into a calculator, and indeed in your working. And then I've got to subtract 4 times by a, which is 1, times by c, which we're told is 4. That is all divided by 2 times by a, which again we know is 1. So we've done our substitution step. It's just about making sure that we resolve that correctly. So if I simplify this, I'm going to get x equaling 5 plus or minus the square root of, well, this is going to become 25 minus 16 inside the square root there, and that's all over 2. So that means x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 9 over 2, and that means that I'm going to have, the square root of 9 is 3, so this is going to become 5 plus 3, which is 8, divided by 2, so x is either equal to 4, or x is equal to 5 minus 3, which is 2, divided by 2 is 1. So I've got those two possible solutions there. If we just finish with a slightly more difficult example here, we've got at the bottom here x squared minus 8x minus 20. I'm actually going to modify this question a little bit and make it 3x squared. So let's make it 3x squared minus 8x minus 20 is equal to 0. Alright, I'd like you to write down what a is equal to, b is equal to, and c is equal to, and then to click play again. Pause, what's a, b, and c, and then play. Right, well done. If you said a is equal to 3, b is equal to negative 8, c is equal to negative 20. What do we do next? We write out the quadratic formula. Have a go at writing down, closing the screen, what the quadratic formula is. And well done if you said x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Right, now what do you need to do next? Say it out loud. That's right, you need to substitute your values for a and b and c into this. So, if we do this step by step, what is my a equal to? My a is equal to 3, my b is equal to negative 8, my c is equal to negative 20. So, I could say that x is equal to negative of negative b, so that's going to be the negative of negative 8, that will become positive 8, plus or minus the square roots of negative 8 squared, notice I put it in brackets, minus 4 times by a, which is now 3, so a is not always going to be 1, times c, which I can see is negative 20, and I'm going to write that in brackets as well, just out of habit with negative numbers substitution. And of course this here is actually going to mean that the negative 4 times 3 and the negative 20, that's actually going to become plus a positive value because we've got a negative times a negative still. And that's all divided by 2a, which of course now is going to be 2 times 3, not 2 times 1. So I'm going to get times 2 divided by 2 times 3. I would have a go at, could you have a go at simplifying this, pressing pause, simplifying this. I would say to begin with, you should be able to do this without a calculator. So have a go at doing this without a calculator, then checking it with a calculator, and then clicking play again. And what do we get? If we simplify this, we get x equaling 8, negative 8 is going to be from positive 8, plus or minus, and then we're going to have negative 8 squared, negative times negative is positive, so this is 64, and then we're going to have 4 times 3 is 12, 12 times 2 is 24, so 12 times 20 is going to be 240, and this is negative times negative are positive, so plus 240. So I did far too long a square root sign there, didn't I? And that's all over 2 times 3, so 6. Right, what's 64 plus 240? That's going to be 304, isn't it? So I've got 8 plus or minus the square root of 304 all over 6. Now I think it's quite possible that the square root of 304 does simplify. I could look for square numbers that go into that. I could use my calculator as well, and actually it does simplify to be 4 root 19. So I get x equaling 8 plus or minus 4 root 19 all over 6. And then I just need to deal with this plus or minus. So there's two possibilities, either x is 8 plus 4 root 19 all over 6, or x is 8 minus 4 root 19 all over 6. I'm going to have to leave, if I want to leave an exact answer, I'm going to have to leave it in this third form. So I can say then that x is equal to 8 plus 4 root 19 all over 6, or 8 minus 4 root 19 all over 6. And of course, well done if you recognised that this means we can actually simplify this a little bit more, because every term here is a factor of 2, so we could divide the top and bottom by 2 to give us answer in simplest form. So if we choose to do that, we can have that x is equal to 4 plus 2 root 19 over 3, or x is 4 minus 2 root 19 all over 3. I hope that helps now. I might try and find a further explanation video that seems good and useful for you to have a go at. Do your best with the lesson that you've been set, and do continue to message me with any specific questions that you have.